Hello everybody, my name's Kate Russell, technology reporter, author and professional ferret mum. But today it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our session for MABLE, Fantastic Books' massive autumn book launch event. And today the genre under the microscope is parody and satire. In this genre, you're going to be hearing from Mark P Henderson, who's going to be reading from National Cake Day in Ruritania, The Cat of Doom, and another one of his books. And Walt Pilcher is going to be reading from Everybody Shrugged on Shallowed Ground. Our tenuous link to ferrets in these books are ferrets have been known to work long and hard at dragging some large object, their favourite human for example, that happens to me, into their tiny den, a task that anyone with at least a small amount of spatial awareness can see is pointless. In Everybody Shrugged, this relentless pursuit of the pointless is a particular skill of Second Lieutenant Edgar Duffel, who works underground, literally, leading a team dedicated to weaponising unlikely objects such as the artichoke. Duffel is fiercely loyal to his commanding officer, Major Tony Farina. It doesn't concern him that Farina is clearly a bit stupid, because Duffel himself is equally stupid. Roy Redman in National Cake Day in Ruritania would have done well if he had been born a ferret. He is overly curious, keen to explore, agile, distressingly light-fingered, and mischievous. He is also capable of ministering sharp bite in the extremes. So, that's what you've got coming up. Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. We'll begin.
The interview you're about to experience is part of MABLE's spotlight on fantastic books that can be classified as satire and parody. Featured today are 5 books that provide outstanding examples. Let's allow the 2 authors of these books to introduce each other.
I'm Walt Pilcher, and I give you Mark P Henderson, author of National Cake Day in Ruritania, The Cat of Doom, and a third book, the title of which I have no idea how to pronounce, and so I'm going to ask you if you can pronounce it.
And I'm Mark Henderson. No, not even I can pronounce it correctly.
So, seriously?
Well, all right. It's the Engklimasat. The Engklimasat.
All right, everybody. Say that 3 times fast.
All right, we'll get to it later. In the meantime, here again is Walt Pilcher, author of Everybody Shrugged.
Everybody Shrugged.
And On Shallowed Ground.
On Shallowed Ground.
Dr. Barker's scientific metamorphical prostate health formula and other stories, poems, comedy, and dark matter from the center of the universe.
All right. And other books as well. But we'll just focus on these 5 today, although I do plan to cheat.
Well, I might cheat as well, Walt. The satire and parody spotlight. Yes, that's our spotlight. So we might start by discussing what satire and parody are.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do that without becoming too academic?
Well, I hope so. Now, since you and our publisher are both in the UK, why don't you give us some definitions from the authoritative and venerable Oxford English Dictionary?
Yeah, all right, I thought you might ask it. I noted these down. Satire, a way of criticizing a person, an idea, or an institution in which you use humor to show their faults or weaknesses. A piece of writing that uses this type of criticism. And parody, a piece of writing, music, acting, etc., that deliberately copies the style of somebody or something in order to be humorous.
All right, so what we've established is we're talking about stuff that pokes fun, is funny, and hopefully fun.
Well, certainly fun to write. Even more fun when people laugh at what we've written, or provided they laugh at the funny bits.
Well, I hear that, but I have a confession to make, Mark. I haven't read any of your 3 spotlight books.
And I haven't read any of your spotlight books either, Walt. Not yet.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm sure there's a way to to remedy that, and we can find it pretty quickly.
I'm sure we can. Right. So the challenge in this discussion is to see if we can convince each other to read these spotlight books. Right. As a start, Walter, I'm curious to know what draws you to writing satire in the first place.
Okay, well, a fair question. I really like to write humorous stuff, and I seem to have a talent for finding the humorous side of things and imitating things and finding the unexpected juxtapositions. And that's a great humor device, and I use it a lot. So you can see why I'd be drawn to satire and parody.
Yes.
First story I ever wrote at age 8. It's called, it was a detective story. It was called The Case of the Muddy Shoes. Now, I didn't know it was parody. I don't think I was trying to be funny. I was just, trying to have some fun. But children imitate things, and that's what I was doing. I was imitating stuff I had heard on the radio. Probably there were a lot of great detective stories or programs on the radio in those days. So that's what I was doing. But I also wrote parody radio commercials, and an example of which is Mother Murphy's Moldy Meatballs. Now, that's pretty funny when you're 11 years old.
Alliterations like that are funny at any age.
Yeah, I guess so. But that was then. And as an adult, I think for me, satire derives from an inherent distrust of authority. I think authority needs to be challenged. And I know my novel, Killing O'Carolyn, isn't on the spotlight list today, but there's a passage in it where my main character, the chronically unemployed Mark Fairley, talks about authority during a parody of a job interview that he's finally having after sending out scores of resumes and getting only one response. And here, and I'm going to read a little bit from it, a self-important vice president named Randall is interviewing Mark. And so let's pick it up from there. Mark, we've talked a little about the strengths you would bring to the position, said Randall. But now let me ask you, what will you say some of your weaknesses are? Well, I have weaknesses for grilled cheese and tomato sandwiches, dark chocolate, and Dilbert. Aha, but seriously. Okay, here's something, I admitted. I have this sort of love-hate relationship with authority. I think I've picked up on that. See, on the one hand, I respect authority, whether I'm under it or have some of it myself. It's important, but I need to question it. I've seen it abused. I think it needs to be kept a little uncomfortable. Now, some people may see that as a weakness. So you're wondering, will he be a Dilbert, a smart but cynical, sarcastic, intractable pain in the butt? Or will he be a useless, spineless toady who looks to see what the boss is thinking before he commits? Or is he a team player who thinks outside the box and demonstrates leadership, perseverance, and loyalty to his colleagues in the company? And what do you think I would conclude? Randall responded. Well, I hope it would be the loyal team player and all that. Now, in this passage, Mark is expressing how I personally feel toward authority. General skepticism about authority leads to poking fun at it, at least in my case. And I think it's kind of generally true. So we ridicule it, we lampoon it. And frankly, I think it's probably the greatest source of satire that there is. And it's certainly what drew me to write a satirical novel about government overreach, which is Everybody Shrugged, which is in today's spotlight.
I really enjoy Killing O'Callaghan. The satire is good humor and it's entertaining. And the music you created for the appendix of the book was, in my view, a brilliant addition.
Thank you.
I love the previous Mark Fairley novel too, The Accidental Spurrt. Once again, it was good humored and very funny while making its satirical point, the point you've just outlined. I've yet to read Everybody Shrugged, but I'm about to order it. Tell me about that.
Okay, I will tell you about that as soon as I put up the virtual background that where's Everybody Shrugged? There it is. Okay.
Ah, yes.
Here we are. All right. Now, in answer to your question, the jacket blurb pretty much tells you why you should read Everybody Shrugged. And I know it's probably not possible to read that on the screen, so I'll just read it from the typed version over here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Ready? Hold tight to your car, French fries, beer, cigarettes, sexy underwear, bacon, butter, coffee, and anything else that tastes good, feels good, or is fun to do because here comes Congress to ban it. The government is outlawing all popular products deemed hazardous to your health, and the military is stripped of guns because war is hazardous too. But the Army is secretly weaponizing the government's research in the name of national security, and the ensuing harmful substance race will spell the difference between peace and global bedlam. From the Pentagon to the Oval Office to a forgotten Army base, into the halls of academia, and off to a shadowy European castle, an endearing cast bumble at cross purposes so outlandish you must keep reading to see how this delightful poke in the eye is resolved. Jump from the absurd to the ridiculous, careening between satire and reality in this side-splitting tale of government overreach on steroids.
Oh,
Now, every one of the aforementioned elements is parodied in the novel, and every single character in the book is a moron. But as the blurb says, endearing on one level or another, because of course they all take themselves much too seriously.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I've seen the endorsements on this book, though I've yet to read it. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, even the endorsements are parodies because I don't have any real ones. Here's my favorite. No harmful substances were abused in the publishing of this book. And that's from Harmful Substance World magazine.
Oh, I love it. I wonder if I can subscribe to it. Well, anyway, that's great fun, Walt. But why did you choose to write this book?
You know, they say write what you know. I grew up near Washington, D.C. I worked for the government for a while. I was in the Army. I've obviously been a university student, and I was also a university trustee later. I've seen many shadowy European castles. When you take a tour of Europe, that's all you see, and the cathedrals, of course. So as targets of satire, you know, those were kind of low-hanging fruit for me. I knew firsthand the stuff I was making fun of. So if you want something that bashes government, the military, and academia, but all in good fun, then Everybody Shrugged is the book for you.
Oh, well, yes, it sounds like the book for me, I must admit. Aside from your natural leaning towards satire, are any well-known authors or performers people who've influenced your writing, or your writing of this book anyway?
Well, yeah, and the writing of pretty much everything I do. Then there are a lot of them. The ones that come to mind: Stan Freberg, Woody Allen, Peter Sellers, Stephen Fry, and of course Monty Python, among many others. And Mad Magazine. Growing up in America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that was really every teenage boy's handbook of satire. And I have another fun background video slide to show you again, if I can find the thing. Yes, get out of the way here.
Oh, yes.
This is my very first selfie, and it's me reading a copy of Mad Magazine, and this picture probably was taken in the late 50s, really.
Oh, I always used to love Mad Magazine. Well, I'm more or less convinced I should read Everybody Shrugged.
Good.
But look, before I commit to that one, tell me about the other book of yours that's being spotlighted, the one with the massive title.
All right. Well, it's an eclectic anthology of sorts, and let me put the correct background up on that one too. There we go. Which way do I go here? On Shallowed Ground. It's called On Shallowed Ground, including Dr. Barker's scientific metamorphical prostate health formula and other stories, poems, comedy, and dark matter from the center of the universe. Now, while the title tells you the makeup and tone of the book, the cover blurb, once again, is even more engaging and revealing, I think. So let me read that.
Okay.
A new take on alien abduction. What's the best religion? A literally lighthearted look at prostates. Barbecue rustlers of the Old West. The village idiot goes to Washington. The danger of going backwards through a Walmart emergency exit. Recycled silver bullets, revolting hippies, and so much more. Plus, an interactive story where you get to choose the surprise ending. These stories, poems, and songs are literary depth charges. You'll explode with laughter when you least expect it. Written with the pen of a master storyteller, which Mr. Pilcher purchased on eBay from the estate of a famous author. You'll be glad you didn't skip school the day they taught reading. Well, now, here the parody begins on the cover with a spoof on Moses. Again, it'll get out of the way here. You notice Moses is holding not the traditional 2 stone tablets with the 10 commandments from God, but rather only 1 tablet, and it contains 1 commandment only. And let me blow that up for you. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Cover blurb. Thou shalt not take thyself too seriously. And that's the spirit of the whole book. And frankly, it's the spirit of pretty much everything I write.
Oh, that's great. Yes. That is great satire. I love that. I noticed that the cover blurb also says always fun and often profound. What did you mean by that phrase?
Well, it means we should take ourselves a little seriously.
Yeah, okay.
As we've said, satire has a point, usually. It's a comment, and it isn't making fun just to be silly, although there's a place for that. But I think satire is a lot more fun and revealing, rewarding. I mean, when there's a message.
Yes.
Even though I'm not sure it has to be, too very high-minded. Anyhow, here's an example, since we're talking about that sort of thing, from On Shallowed Ground. It's a little science fiction parody poem with a nice moral at the end. And if you'll allow me to read that, I will do so.
Oh, please, yes.
Let me, okay. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Alien for dinner, or how an hors d'oeuvre saved the earth. I dreamed the alien showed up at dinner time, all tentacles and smiles and get to know you. 3-fingered hands reached out in eager pantomime, while grave suspicions fed my paranoia. I'm more than glad to represent Earth's race to visitors who land from outer space, but too much glee when hastening to greet me spelled a less than diplomatic plan to eat me. There has to be a better way, I signed, than eating hosts wherever you alight. There's better food I'll try my best to find before my head becomes a tasty bite. Reacting fast, I offered cheese and crackers, which was all I had on hand to buy some time, but it satisfied a need, and my attacker's hungry drool turned into happy slime. A grin appearing in a gaping orifice, a mundane snack averting mankind's end. What caused this quite surprising metamorphosis from predator to everlasting friend? For every nationality or strangest galaxality, no matter color, size, and shape or name, shown love and hospitality, it's simply a reality. Beneath the carapace, we're all the same.
Oh, Walt, I like it. That is lovely. As you say, it's fun. It has that quite simple moral at the end. And oh, your rhymes, there's something else.
Well, I hope you're almost ready to read the book now.
Well, I'm certainly getting there.
That's progress. Now, even though I haven't read your 3 spotlight books, I have read about them. And it's clear you have a very well-developed sense of the absurd, I'll say, to come up with the oddball premises and situations in these books, not to mention the titles. And I think that's a hallmark of British humor. But I wonder how you account for it in your own case. Let me see here. If we get back to the right virtual background for yeah. Didn't mean for that one to come up. Let's see. Um,
Oh yes, there we are. That's made me feel at home.
all right.
It's okay. That's a fair question, Walt. Thank you. Well, I think the clearest illustration is in the book with the unpronounceable title, the Engklimasat.
Uh-huh.
It's an invented word derived from Greek roots. It means that which stops or prevents crime. And of course, having a word derived from Greek roots makes me sound very scholarly. Well, the story is driven by a simple what-if question. What would happen to society if crime, as in law breaking, became impossible, indeed inconceivable? And this question was implanted in my brain nearly a quarter of a century ago when I was teaching part-time in a men's prison. The student who implanted it was ex-military, and he was doing a moral philosophy degree while he was in prison. It set me thinking. It wasn't until 5 or 6 years ago that I found a way of writing a novel addressing the question, and Fantastic Books Publishing very kindly took it on and unleashed it on the unsuspecting world in 2019.
Okay. Well, I think that must be a pretty good story. I mean, obviously the question is how could law breaking or even the idea of law breaking be made impossible? And of course, why did Fantastic Books Publishing like it?
Well, the premise is absurd, of course, but it
Yeah.
enabled me to explore how much the critical infrastructure, the cultural infrastructure of developed countries depends on the existence of crime and its prevention and punishment.
Yeah.
The Engklimasat, that which stops the crime, is achieved by the machinations of an ambitious young demon from the University of Pandemonium, aka Hell.
Mm-hmm.
The consequences are socially and economically devastating. Devastating not only for criminals, but also for a substantial part of the legal profession, and not to mention the police, the prison service, manufacturers of safety and surveillance equipment, crime novelists, crime reporters, numerous facets of society involving the employment of millions of people and billions of pounds, dollars, and other currencies in investment. Well, as for what sold it to FBP, Dan, the CEO of Fantastic Books, wrote on the jacket cover, "Who other than Mark Henderson would translate 'Abandon hope, all ye that enter here' into gangster rap?" And the publishers produced the endorsement, "Brilliant tale full of erudite wit and an array of delightful characters, mortal and otherwise." And I couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah.
Needless to say, the array of delightful characters represent a cross-section of society. They're there to show how the Engklimasat affects the entire range of people, mortal people, I mean.
Okay, that's brilliant. And that's satire by any of our definitions. But I have to ask, is there any parody in it?
Yes, well, there is. I use material from Dante's Inferno and Milton's Paradise Lost to portray hell as a university, the University of Pandemonium, with a faculty of inhumanities, a faculty of unnatural sciences, a faculty of antisocial sciences, and so forth, including a school of architecture. I had fun with that. And I also had fun with inventing hell's favorite sport, soul trashing.
Oh,
Now, soul trashing is a parody on our more familiar real-world sports. But the structure of hell in this novel parodies two of the greatest European poets.
yeah.
That really shows how parody can target things that we love and respect without diminishing our love and respect for them. Though it can also target things we'd like to vanish into the waste bin of history.
That's a good thought. And I'm almost tempted to read this book, but I really don't know how I'm going to recommend it to others unless I know how to pronounce the title. So,
It takes practice.
So let's move on to, what about your other spotlight novels?
Well, there's National Cake Day in Ruritania. That was the first issue. They changed the cover of it.
Yeah.
This was published in 2018. FBP were prepared to consider it because a year or so earlier they'd published my collection of pun-laden poems and stories, Cruel and Unusual Punishments, with an extra N in punishments. And they published that largely thanks to David Moss's cartoon illustrations, I think.
Well, now I say I have read that one, and I loved it really because I love plays on words. And I've read your Con and Parallels too. And I really do recommend those, but they are clearly not satire, something different entirely.
No, they're quite different, aren't they? Yes, I mean they're pretty serious books, though yeah. I hope there's an element of humor in them. Anyway, National Cake Day in Ruritania is a satire on almost everything. Politics, economics, law, philosophy, including logic, religion, science, technology, medicine, sport, even folklore. For example, the macroeconomics of Ruritania in this novel depends fundamentally on the manufacture and consumption of cake. So the hereditary bakers, the aristocrats of the country, constitute the government. The state religion is medically based, the Church of Asclepius, and medical treatment takes place in church surgeries. And thereby I contrive to poke fun at my own former profession, medicine, as well as offering a critique of democracy versus oligarchy and so forth. Now, and there are parodies in the novel as well. I picked out this particular example for the purpose of this recording. Chapter 23, we meet I don't know, it won't be readable on the screen, but there it is. We meet the Gödelbus unsatisfiability theorem, which states informally that if you have a set of logically connected proposition containing at least one non-analytic premise, there is at least one paradox. Well, in other words, as soon as you state something meaningful, something that's not merely true by definition, such as 2 + 2 = 4, or all bachelors are unmarried men, you are bound to start contradicting yourself. And the way I put it in this epigraph to the chapter, therefore, nothing can be reliably known. The clown feet of contradiction invariably trip the fall guy of certainty. The Gödelbus theorem is a logical proof of postmodernism. It's a parody on the real-world Gödel incompleteness theorem, which states, to put it informally, that in any set of logically connected propositions there's at least one that might be either true or false, but you can never decide which. Now, that real theorem was proved by Kurt Gödel in the 1930s, and it's one of the pinnacles of formal logic. Among other things, it showed that you can't completely derive mathematics from logic. The fake theorem, the one in here, which is the work of the fictional Turk Gödelbus, is just nonsense. Though the novel's protagonist, Rory Redmond, who is a logician, shows that the Gödelbus theorem is psychologically valid, in the sense that if we delve deeply enough into all the things we believe, we're bound to find a contradiction at some point. Rory Redmond came from an exercise during a creative writing session. We were asked to choose blindly from 4 sets of options: profession, favorite pastime, sporting activity, foible. And I managed to choose logician, Morris dancing, marathon running, kleptomania. Well, we all have a challenge, don't we? Anyway, that's how Rory was created. And then I realized I could use him as the protagonist of the satirical novel I've been planning for 3 years, mainly set in a fictitious country. My Ruritania is geographically challenged. Moves around, so you never know where you'll find it next. Now, I managed to end the novel with Rory facing a difficult choice and demanding, why can you never find an existentialist when you need one? Now, that book's had mixed reviews. Some people find it hilarious and thoroughly enjoy it. Others find it ridiculous, which of course it is, and can't read it. Then it's impossible for an author to please everyone.
Well, hilarious and ridiculous sounds like my cup of tea. And you've squeezed a lot of weighty stuff into the book, but you've disguised it as a big joke, and I like that. I just might try and read it.
Thank you.
Now, what about the third of your spotlight books, The Cat of Doom?
The Cat of Doom. Now, this is a novella that Fantastic Books published in 2020. My original title was The Man Who Let the Cat of Doom Out of the Bag, but Dan took his shears to that. It's subtitled A Surreal Apocalyptic Fantasy with Poetical and Musical Interludes. Now, the jacket blurb reads, "There's an apocalyptic quest to be fulfilled, but who would entrust it to this cast?" Heads turn at the arrival of obsessive psychotherapist Herr Dr. Von Tour, Glaswegian enforcer Big Vince, incompetent Cuthbert Fell, his only friend Abdul, marathon runner Selena Crumpet, and serial killer Gardner Carpenter. And that's without Gabriella de Clare seeking her true self and finding someone else's, Anglican priest Patricia, a trio of trees, a pack of mangy dogs, and a gnome called Smiley.
The gnome.
Now, many of the songs and poems that interrupt the story and sometimes inform it involve the sort of sick humour you expect from a former medic, particularly from a country that produced Monty Python. But at least one of these pieces is a straightforward, absolutely straightforward parody. And I singled this one out with a bookmark. We find one of the mangy dogs reciting the poem Daffodils, A Dog's Perspective. I bounced out in the April breeze that blows the scents across the hills, and there, beneath the sodding trees, were all these sodding daffodils. Upon the grass they sag and sway, and get right in a puppy's way. They grew, I saw at single glance, so dense and variously angled, their nodding heads and sprightly dance would get a hapless canine tangled. I peer through prisoning flowers and shoots. The silly humans think it's cute. So now, when on my back I lie and wag my tail from side to side, they flash upon that inward eye and make my grin grow very wide. And then, with joy, my bladder fills and pisses on the daffodils. As for satire, well, I turn my general annoyance with numerologists and self-styled pyramid interpreters into a recurring joke. There's a sort of foreword in the book called the preliminary fable, which begins, "Why are human societies obsessed by the number 12? Asked the first philosopher. Is it because there are 12 months in a year, or because there are 12 inches in a foot?" After a pause, the second philosopher said, "6 of one and half a dozen of the other, I reckon." There was another pause, and then the third philosopher gave his answer. 12 is the product of 3 and 4, the number of creation and the number of destruction. Jesus had 12 disciples. They created a new world religion, but one among them destroyed its founder. 12 months of the year compass the time of recreation, and recreation we call spring, and the time of destruction or temporary death we call autumn and winter. He allowed a silence to blossom. Then he said, "Consider the pyramid." The first two philosophers nodded because the third was very wise. He had a long white beard and lived alone at the top of a mountain. So they tried to consider the pyramid. Well, those are some examples of parody and satire in my 3 spotlight novels. Now, how would you compare those examples? Now, this is a rather broad question, I'm afraid, but how would you compare those examples to American humor?
Well, the absurdity in British humor, I think, is sort of in your face. You take Monty Python, for example.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
they did the sort of things you're describing. I mean, here your first 2 philosophers think the third is very wise simply because he has a long white beard and lives alone on top of a mountain.
Yeah.
That is very, very funny. Also, I have to say, I love that line. He allowed a silence to blossom. I just, the picture there, just, I love that. Anyway, and as you were talking about National Cake Day in Ruritania, I was picturing Rory Redmond simultaneously Morris dancing, marathon running, habitually stealing stuff. And if that isn't funny enough, I really had to wonder how, as a logician, he could even survive in the wacky world that you created.
With difficulty. Okay.
Yeah. And now in American humor, the absurdity sort of sneaks up on you, I think.
Yeah, okay.
You're reading along and maybe suddenly step back and say, wait, whoa, I had kind of an epiphany here. This is really funny. And so, at least that's the way mine usually turns out.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Walt. That makes good sense. And I think what you've just described applies very well to the novels of yours that I've read. The Accidental Spurrt and the two Mark Fairley novels. And I've no doubt it applies also in your two Spotlight novels, which I now intend to read.
Well, I have to say that I intend to read all three of yours as well.
Thank you, Walt. Okay.
And so this, I think, has been a successful discussion.
I agree. Yes, I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it very much too. I love comparing notes with you, and I really enjoy the books that I have read of yours, and really looking forward to reading these three as well. So
I'm looking forward to reading yours. Well, that was really good, and I think I liked the questions you threw at me. It made me actually think about what I'd written, and what you've said about your own books has thrown real light on them. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe it's fodder for your next book, whatever that might be.
It could be.
Listen, this has been great, and as we close, I think instead of asking our listeners or viewers to remember all 5 of these books, and I'll put them up on the screen, but maybe the easiest thing to do would be to just ask them to remember our names, Mark Henderson, Walt Pilcher, and I'll put those on the screen too again. And then just look us up on Amazon. Use the search function, and we'll be there, and all of our books will be there too.
Yes, that's a good idea, Walt. It'll be much easier for our viewers and listeners, won't it?
All
okay,
right.
Well, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Have a great day.
And you. Bye for now.